heart, we have our superior vena cava going to our right atrium. The inferior vena cava we don't see. And we have the pulmonary veins, which are colored red, and we see those at the back of the heart. Pulmonary veins from the right and left lung. And they return blood to the left atrium. We can also see on the surface of the heart, on the back of the heart, the venous return. We actually have our coronary circulation. We have our anterior interventricular descending artery, and right next to it is the great cardiac vein returning blood back to the right atrium. Blood that is collected from the heart will all flood into this coronary sinus and empty into our right atrium. Okay, if we open up our heart, we can see the actual myocardium of the heart. This is our interventricular septum, the base of the heart where the great vessels exit and enter, and the apex of the heart, that pointy tip right here. We can see our four chambers, right atria, left atria, right ventricle, left ventricle. We can also see the valves that separate the chambers. We have our right atrioventricular valve, which also is known as the tricuspid. We can see that there are three cusps. Chordae tendineae extend from each cusp and attach to the myocardium through the papillary muscle. On the left side, our atrioventricular valve is a bicuspid valve. It's also known as the mitral valve. There's two cusps. The chordae tendineae also extend down to a papillary muscle from the myocardial wall. We also have two other valves. They are found at the entrances to the great vessels, exiting the heart from the right ventricle, entering into the pulmonary trunk. We pass through the semilunar valve. We want to call this the pulmonary semilunar valve. From the left ventricle, exiting the heart into the aorta, we have our aortic semilunar valve. So you want to make sure that you distinguish between the two semilunar valves. Okay, let's go to our big heart. We see much more in the big heart. We can see all of those structures. We have, again, exiting the heart, the pulmonary trunk, and the left and right pulmonary arteries, which are seen better here. We also have the aorta, leaving our left ventricle, and the aortic arch, and branches coming off the aortic arch. If we remove our pulmonary trunk, we can see that just behind it, one of the first branchings off the base of the aorta. These are the right and left coronary arteries. Right coronary artery extends around to the back. Left coronary artery extends for only a short distance before it divides into the anterior descending interventricular artery and the circumflex artery. Okay, coronary return again is going to be through the great cardiac vein, and everything will empty into this coronary sinus all the way back here and into the right atrium. Okay, more branchings off the aortic arch. We have these three. This first branching is the brachiocephalic artery. It goes to the head through the common carotid artery and the right subclavian artery. The second branching is our left common carotid artery, and the third will branch off and become the left subclavian artery. And we do have further branchings to look at up the aorta, but we'll see them on other models. Okay, entering or bringing blood to, bringing blood to our heart from the head and neck is going to be the superior vena cava, this section right here. It receives blood from the left and the right brachiocephalic veins, and the left brachiocephalic vein receives blood from the left subclavian and the left jugular vein. Our right brachiocephalic receives blood from the right subclavian and the right jugular vein, from the head and the arms. From the lower body, blood is received through the inferior vena cava. Again, we can't see it on this model, but it would be underneath, coming up from the lower torso. Let's put back our pulmonary trunk in here. Okay. Now, we can also see the right and left auricles. If we open them up, the right and left atria are underneath. And if we take off the anterior myocardium. Again, we can see the base of the heart and the apex. We can see some not so good examples of our atrioventricular valves and the chordae tendineae. I don't like using this model for that, but we also can see our pulmonary semilunar valve, and here if we look up, it might be difficult. If you look really deep into that left ventricle all the way up into the aorta, you can see the aortic semilunar valve. And the one other structure we see here is this little white triangle, and that is the ligamentum arteriosum. This is the remnant of the ductus arteriosus, which was a shunting blood from the systemic circulation, from pulmonary circulation to systemic circulation.
What's that called?
This is the ligamentum arteriosum. Okay.
Powder spell.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like one.
Okay, so that's our heart.
Now I remember it.
And what I'll do is I can continue down. Let me use this model here because continuing down the aorta, leaving the heart, continues down as the thoracic aorta and the abdominal aorta. And we need to look at the branches coming off our abdominal aorta. We can see some of these blood vessels on other models, but on this particular model we could see a great deal of their branching. We can see that one of the first branchings coming off the abdominal aorta is the celiac trunk. We don't see it very well in this model. It's this little stub of a blood vessel. We actually have branches going to the spleen, to the liver, and to the stomach as the splenic, hepatic, and gastric arteries. We don't really see them going to those organs, but you can see them in a couple of other models we'll have a look at. We also have, just below that, another branching of our descending abdominal aorta, and this branch will actually carry blood to the small intestine as the superior mesenteric artery. Again, we don't see it going to the small intestine in this model. We can see it better in some other models. Then we have branches going to the kidneys as the renal arteries. And if we go further down, we have these two little branches coming off and going down and extending all the way down into the suprapubic region. These are the gonadal arteries. You can see that they're intertwined with the gonadal veins. These are also known as ovarian testicular arteries. And we can see our inferior mesenteric artery here, which goes to our large intestine. At the end of the aorta, it ends around L1, L2. It branches into the right and left common iliac arteries. At the base of the pelvis, right here, you can see it branches again. One branch goes inward and down, and the other branch continues down and exits the pelvic cavity. That is your internal iliac artery, left internal, and left external iliac artery. The left external iliac artery we'll see exits the pelvis and will go down the leg as the femoral. We can see the venous return through the inferior vena cava and all the branches that bring blood to the inferior vena cava. We can see from below, again, following the arteries, we have our internal iliac veins that run with the internal iliac arteries, and we have our external iliac veins running with the external iliac arteries. They lead into the common iliac veins. Here's the left common iliac vein, and then they empty into the inferior vena cava. We also can see the returning gonadal veins. Notice that the left gonadal vein actually does not return directly to the inferior vena cava. It actually returns first to the left renal vein, and the right gonadal vein does go directly into the inferior vena cava. And of course, here's our right and left renal veins. Our return through the mesenteric system, the inferior and superior mesenteric veins will actually go through the hepatic portal system, which we don't see here. Okay, we can see the adrenal glands. We can see a branch coming off the renal, joining the renal vein. and that's our suprarenal vein. And in some of our models, we can even see the suprarenal artery branch. Okay. This model is also good for portions of the urinary system. We have our kidneys that you can see here. We have the ureters that extend all the way down to the urinary bladder. We can also see, just behind the urinary bladder, the rectum, and we can see some of the smaller structures in the kidneys. We can see the renal pelvis here, and we could see the renal pyramids easily in this particular model. Okay? All right. So let it go to our next. Anybody know what muscle this is? This muscle right here? Anybody want to guess?
Which one?
These two that come down.
Oh, those are those that could.
Is that the?
No.
Psoas muscle. The PSOA.
That's the muscle that with appendicitis.
That's right. It's, if you look at, you can usually see a bare outline on an X-ray, but if somebody has appendicitis, the inflammation actually occludes vision of the muscle. If you can't see the psoas muscle, you know that there's some inflammation in that area. Okay, where are we? Our favorite model of all, the circulatory tree.
Is that the one that is on iPhone?
I think so. I think that's the one he does. Yeah.
Can you go sideways?
So what you want to do is you want to be able to identify many of the vessels that we just went over with the heart and with the descending aorta and inferior vena cava. But here we can see some of their branches. We can again see the aorta and the branches coming off the aorta. We can see our, actually it's a little bit better because we can see our, from the posterior view, actually it's much easier. Now remember, if you're looking at the posterior view, make sure you can determine right from left. Remember that you're looking at the back. So the right is going to be on this side and left is going to be on this side. Okay? So we can see coming off our aorta, we have the brachiocephalic artery. It goes into the common carotid artery and the right subclavian artery. Our second branching off the aorta is the left common carotid artery. And then here we can see our left subclavian artery, and we can actually follow it down. It goes under the clavicle, and then it goes under the armpit as the axillary artery. It becomes the brachial artery, and then it branches in the cubital region, okay, the inside of your elbow, into the radial and ulnar arteries, okay? So our thumb should be like this. Our thumb area, let me just make sure this is good. Okay. So our thumb should be here, so this should be the radial artery, and this would be the ulnar artery. Again, we can see these better when we have other bones or muscles that we can use as a way to orient ourselves. The venous return mimics the actual arteries. We can see that returning from the head and neck area, we have not a carotid vein, but a jugular vein, and it will join the right and left brachiocephalic veins to the superior vena cava. The subclavian veins follow the subclavian arteries on the right and left side. When we get to the venous system in the arm, of course, we have our vascular arm model, but we can see here our brachial or basilic vein. We have a cephalic vein as well going into the subclavian vein. Here in the cubital region, we look for the vein that crosses diagonally across the inside of the elbow, and that's your median cubital vein, this one right here. And then, of course, going down towards the thumb is going to be the radial vein, and towards the pinky is the ulnar vein. Okay. We can also see the common carotid arteries as they extend into the head. And again, we do have a head model to look at this more closely. We could see the left common carotid artery goes up, and then it branches into an internal carotid and an external carotid. You can see the external carotid feeds the outside of the face. The internal carotid enters into the cranium, and it actually makes up the middle branches, or the middle sides of the circle of Willis. Can you see that circle right there? The posterior wall of the circle of Willis is formed by this thick creature with the many, many branches on either side, and that is your basilar artery. And we could see that there are two arteries that come up and form the basilar artery, and these are the right and left vertebral arteries. Again, we could see these much better on our head model, and this is actually much better, okay? Now, if we look at our descending aorta, the thoracic aorta, we have lots of branches that feed our intercostal muscles, but we really want to look at the abdominal aorta. We can see in the posterior view the renal arteries going to the kidneys, and we can see the divisions of the abdominal aorta into the common iliac arteries, the internal and external iliac arteries. If we go around to the anterior of the model, we start seeing some of the branches coming off. Again, it's hard to tell because the branches aren't actually going, you can't see the organs they're going to with the exception of the splenic artery. We have our first branching of the abdominal aorta, and that's the celiac trunk way up here underneath the liver. We could see it extends for just a short little period, and then it branches into a gastric artery right here, which circles around the stomach, a splenic artery, which goes over to the spleen, and then there's a hepatic artery. You can see one of the branches goes up into the liver. There are accompanying veins with the venous return. We have our splenic vein returning to our portal system. We have our gastric vein here, and we'll talk about the liver, hepatic, and the hepatic portal vein afterwards. We can see another branching just underneath that. This is it right here, this very long piece. It has a number 93 on it, I believe. This is your superior mesenteric artery, and it runs along with the superior mesenteric vein going to the small intestine. The next branching underneath that are the renal arteries, and we can see our renal veins going along with it. Beneath that, we have our they've actually they're really, really thin, little spiky arteries coming off, and one vein coming off the inferior vena cava, and that is the base of the gonadal arteries.
Professor?
Yes.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
All of what you're naming, like everything
No,
is going to be on this?
No, I don't like using, like, the gonadals, they're broken, and it's easier to see them on there. But I'm just going through everything. We also have, again, after our gonadals, we should have a branching going to the inferior mesenteric artery, which goes to our large intestine. You can see the vein running along with it. Here you can see our common iliac arteries that have branched from the aorta, and they branch again into an internal iliac and external iliac artery. We follow the external iliac artery down into the leg. It becomes a femoral artery. Eventually, portions of it travels behind the knee. Again, we can see it better on this model as the popliteal artery, and then it branches into an anterior and posterior tibial going down in the lower leg. Venous return, again, follows the arterial distribution. Venous return, anterior, posterior tibial veins, femoral vein to the external iliac artery, joins with the external iliac vein, joining with the internal iliac vein, where is it? Here, to the common iliac vein. The only addition we have is this one right here, and this is our great saphenous vein, and it extends from the medial malleolus all the way up to our external iliac artery. Okay, that's it. Now, we can see on our vascular arm, much better, the structures that we looked at, and I just want to point out specific ones on this arm here. Just put this in here. Okay, our arterial supply to the arm. We have our axillary artery, which you know comes from the subclavian. It comes down and becomes the brachial artery. Very hard to see because it's quite deep and right next to the humerus. That artery will actually divide in the cubital area into our brachial artery. It will divide into our radial and ulnar artery, and they actually go along the bones. And here's our radial artery. This is where you're going to take your blood gases. The artery actually should be a little bit more, it should be in that nice hollowed center right there, but it's a little inside. Anyway, the venous return, a little more complicated, and we can see that many of the veins are superficial. We can see that we have a ulnar and radial vein. We have the median cubital vein right here, which crosses the cubital region. It goes into our basilic vein and cephalic vein. Those veins will join together as the axillary vein and then eventually the subclavian. That's all we have on this model. We can see on our arm model our radial artery here and our ulnar artery. That's pretty much what we see. And we can see also our brachial, portions of our brachial artery right here. And here's the axillary.
Can you just do that one more time?
Yeah, here's our axillary here. The brachial is just underneath this sheathing right here. That's our brachial. Comes down to here and it branches into our radial and our ulnar artery. Okay, and then we have the leg model. We can see also some of our various structures here in the pelvic cavity. Again, we're going to have our, this is going to be our external iliac artery and vein. As they exit the pelvic cavity, they become the femoral artery and vein. When they get to the knee region, we can look at the back of the knee and see the artery and vein right there as the popliteal artery and vein. Posterior tibial arteries and veins we have right here, and the anterior tibial arteries and veins we can see anteriorly.
Where's the anterior?
Here in, no, actually, it's a branch of it, but that's our best view. Okay. We also have, let's see, in terms of blood vessels, we have this blood vessel board here, which actually shows many of the we've put some letters. Somebody did our letters for us, but we have, not all of them are labeled, but give yourself a little quiz trying to identify these structures. Again, we can see that all of these vessels that we have just looked at. In this particular model, one thing that we can't see very well, if I look correctly, is if you look at the liver, which is a great big brown structure in the right, just underneath the diaphragm here, and you can see the hepatic vein as it comes out of the liver and joins the inferior vena cava. Okay, we don't have a good view of the hepatoportal system here, unfortunately, but we do have a view of it on this particular model. This is a model of the lymphatic system. It contains the labels here of the things we have to identify. However, the labels will be removed during the practical. We can see, in terms of the lymphatics, we need to know the various lymph nodes. We have our cervical lymph nodes, which are these in the neck region. You can see that there's a network of little yellow dots connected by yellow lines. Those are the lymph nodes and lymph vessels, efferent and afferent vessels going into and out of the lymph nodes, or the other way around, and they usually surround the veins, the larger veins. So here's our cervical. The axillary lymph nodes are in the axillary region. We also have hilar lymph nodes, which surround, actually, the primary bronchus. Okay, these actually can be seen on x-rays, particularly if they are inflamed. We have mesenteric lymph nodes, which actually are around particularly the superior and inferior mesenteric veins. And we have our inguinal lymph nodes. And these are down here in the inguinal area at the top of the thigh. A few other structures that we can see related to the lymphatic system is we have our thoracic duct. And if you remember, lymph will go into the thoracic duct, which is this white line that goes all the way up the abdominal thoracic cavity, and then you can actually see the thoracic duct emptying into a portion of the left subclavian vein. Sometimes it empties into the left brachiocephalic vein. What else do we have? Okay, a few arteries and veins that we can see. Here we have the liver raised up. So not only can we see the liver, gallbladder, and cystic duct, but we can see the venous return from the mesentery. From our small intestine, we have our red superior mesenteric arteries and blue superior mesenteric veins. The venous return will go from the superior mesenteric vein, join the hepatic portal vein, which is right here, which goes all the way up to the liver. Okay, and we can see our inferior mesenteric artery and vein in the mesentery of the large intestine, and branches of that will eventually join also that portal vein, but we don't actually see the direct connection, but you can see the inferior branches. Okay, so that's important. We can see some of our branches off the brachiocephalic veins here, and again, it's because we have a lot of the venous return seen here because our lymphatic system is so closely aligned with our venous system. Okay, good. All right, what else do we have for blood vessels? We have this particular model right here. This is a great model because you can really see our jugular veins in the neck. We can see our common carotid arteries in the neck very well. We can see a variety of different structures if we remove our lungs and diaphragm.
Can you stay on this side?
Okay. We can actually see many of the vessels as they enter and exit the heart, just as we had spoken of before. We can also see, I wonder if we can, I don't think we can see other structures here, but this is exactly the same as our abdominal model that we had just talked about. But we can see structures that are on, for example, our intestines, our pancreas, and our liver. These are all on the additional models that we'll go over for digestive system. And, of course, we have our kidneys, ureters to the urinary bladder, just as we have in our abdominal model. There's not much of a difference. We can also see in the head area the cricothyroid cartilage covering the larynx, which is part of our respiratory system. And we can see, if we look here, we can actually see, here's the tongue. So we have right here a submandibular salivary gland, and this would be the sublingual salivary gland. We can see those. I prefer using the digestive model that we have for that, though, but we can see them. All right. So we can see our spleen here as well, be able to identify the general organs. Okay, let's go to our fetus right here. On our fetus, we have our, we're looking at fetal circulation. We're looking at the fetal side of the placenta, which means that we're looking at the arterial blood flow from the heart. If you remember, fetal circulation will travel down to the internal iliac arteries. And if you look, here's the urinary bladder right down here at the base of the pelvis, and you can see the right and left internal iliac arteries. They're blue or purplish, and they have a little arrow on them. So we have a right and left internal iliac artery. Those will actually branch into the two umbilical arteries right here. These are the two umbilical arteries. They will go into the umbilical cord, and you can see them blue inside the umbilical cord on their way to the placenta, where they will become the placental arteries as blue and placental veins as red, returning blood flow. Now, when we get to the umbilical cord, there's only one placental vein, and it is red colored, and we can see it exiting the placenta into the abdominal cavity. That placental vein will actually travel towards the liver, and it will join eventually with the hepatic portal system. We're not going to go through the ductus venosum shunt. The only other things that we can see here is, and there's a paper clip through the small hole in the heart between the right and left atria. This is the first shunt, and this is your foramen ovale. Okay, whoops. So I'll keep that in there so you guys can see it. The second shunt we don't see. We don't see the ductus arteriosum well at all here, but we can see the remnant of it on the adult heart. Okay, so that's our fetus. Then we have our head. Can you give me that cranium? Yes. Here we can see a better view of the vasculature, or at least the arterial supply, whoops, to the, there we go, to the base of the brain. Here we have our common carotid artery, and we could see that just here, the ramus of the mandible, it branches. It bifurcates into an internal carotid and an external carotid. External carotid comes out and feeds the outside of the cranium, and the internal carotid enters into the cranium through a small foramen and becomes the lateral side of the circle of Willis, this circular structure right here. Then we also have our vertebral arteries. We can see our right and left vertebral arteries. They travel through the transverse foramen of the cervical vertebrae. They enter into the cranium. Let's see if we can do it this way. Through the foramen magnum, our left vertebral artery is a little broken there. But you can see, the right is broken. The left continues up and becomes the basilar artery with all the little branches. Basilar artery will be the posterior wall of our circle of Willis. Can you see here? Okay, so here's our circle of Willis. Here's the basilar artery. Here's one of the vertebral arteries from the left side. And this are the internal carotids. Yeah, the internal carotids, okay, that come up from the neck. Okay, good. Blood cells. Okay, with our blood cells, we have to be able to identify the models. You'll have an accompanying slide that shows the blood cell actually under the microscope as well. So if you actually have a blood cell that is like this, with this multi-lobed polymorphonuclear nucleus, you would have the same cell identified under the microscope. This is a neutrophil or polymorphonuclear leukocyte, and you can tell by the multi-lobe nucleus, and it actually is a granular leukocyte because you have these tiny little granules inside. No, you have to say either polymorphonuclear leukocyte or neutrophil.
It's going to be under the microscope?
It will also be under the microscope, yeah. This one is, anybody want to guess? With eosinophil with the red granules, okay. And that is our eosinophil. It works in allergies. Here is our basophil because it has blue purpley granules, okay. We also have the agranular leukocytes. This really large one right here is a monocyte. It has this great big horseshoe-shaped nucleus, they call it, and it's quite large and agranular. Then we have two small agranular leukocytes. The larger one is the B plasma cell, okay, and which is a lymphocyte. And then the smaller one is a T cell, or T plasma cell, or T lymphocyte. Okay. Again, B lymphocyte, humoral immunity. They make antibodies. T cell is cellular immunity. And then finally we have our erythrocyte. Please don't call it a red blood cell. Call it an erythrocyte. And then finally this model right here is actually the formation of a thrombus. What we have here are platelets, many platelets, and fibrin, right? If you remember your coagulation cascade, this is the last product that is developed in the coagulation cascade, fibrin, and it binds together the platelets into a thrombus.
So when we identify, you say
Well, platelets, fibrin, and thrombus.
Oh, you will
That's
ask us
it.
by parts of it.
Yeah, the
And then the
fibrin, the platelets, and the whole thing represents a thrombus. Yeah. Okay. What else do we have? That's it for our. If anybody remembers anything I may have forgotten, let me know. We'll go over it. Okay. So on this table we have the systems. Okay. For our digestive system, I'll start over there because we'll have our digestive system over there. Our digestive system, we start with this flatboard model. This flatboard model, we can see the alimentary canal and the accessory organs of digestion.
Which one is the alimentary
Alimentary
canal?
canal is the whole tube passageway that goes all the way through to the end.
Okay.
Okay, and the accessory structures are the structures that the actual food you ingest does not actually pass through or touch. Okay, so in terms of the alimentary canal, we can see that we have our oral cavity and pharynx. It extends down into the esophagus. The esophagus will move towards the stomach. Okay, in our stomach we can see our rugae and we can see the pyloric sphincter. Okay, if we leave our stomach, we're entering the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. In the duodenum, we can see two little openings. The lower opening is the ampulla of Vader, also known as the papilla of Vader, or the hepatopancreatic papilla, or the hepatopancreatic sphincter. There's so many names for it. But that is where we have secretion. This lower, right there, down there.
Okay.
Okay, and that actually is where secretions from the gallbladder and pancreas empty into the duodenum. We can see this small green structure. That is the common bile duct carrying bile from the liver, from the gallbladder. And then we can see inside our pancreas, right here, the pancreatic duct joining it. Okay, at the ampulla of Vader. The duodenum continues down, and then it becomes the jejunum. The jejunum is most of our small intestine here in the middle. And then the third part of the small intestine is the ileum, and we can see the ileum or identify it by following backwards from where it attaches to the large intestine. So this would be ileum here. You know, all this here would be ileum. Okay. In our ileum, we can see what's called the ileocecal sphincter. It is a sphincter that allows passage of material into the first part of the large intestine, the cecum. Extending off the cecum, we can see our appendix right here, and then we can see the parts of the large intestine. We have our ascending colon. Here's our hepatic flexure, transverse colon. Here's our splenic flexure, descending colon, and we can see it becomes the sigmoid colon right here, and then rectum is here, and then our anal sphincter is right here. It should be right there. Okay, it's probably not the best model for seeing these structures, but you can identify them. We can see our spleen right here. Okay, although it's not part of our digestive system, we can see the celiac trunk coming off the descending aorta. We can see a branch going to the spleen, so it's our splenic artery, and there's the splenic vein coming back.
But these won't be asked on this model, correct?
No, I mean, they always could be, but usually we just stick to digestive structures.
Quick
But
question,
they
what
could
is
be.
this underneath here? This cream, like yellowish colors, or yellow?
That's pancreas. That's just
And these things right
these
here?
white lines are the pancreatic ducts.
Okay.
They collect digestive enzymes from the acinar cells, and then they actually will be passing through the pancreatic ducts to the duodenum. See, we actually have two pancreatic ducts in here, but the one we're concerned about is this lower one here, the larger one, because it joins with the common bile duct. Okay. We can also see some of the accessory structures of digestion, not just the pancreas and the pancreatic duct. We can also see in the head area, we can see our parotid gland. Okay.
The head of the pancreas?
No, we have our pancreas, but in the head area.
Oh, I'm sorry,
in
the head.
our cephalic area here, we can see our parotid gland, and we can see the duct of the parotid gland that pierces the buccal masseter muscle. And then we have below the jaw right here is our submandibular gland, and we don't see the sublingual. I don't believe we do. No. Sublingual glands, no, we don't. Okay, we don't really see much else. You can see the trachea here as it goes down to the respiratory passageways. See this little blue line with a 25 on it? That represents the epiglottis. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so we will just put that back together. And let's move on to some of our other structures. The liver, for example, here. This particular liver, again, you're looking at the underneath of the liver. And again, the liver's going to sit like this. Okay, it's going to sit like this.
Do you think there's any way that lovely video you're taking, we can all see?
I don't even know how to do that.
But Amy does.
We'll help you with that part.
Oh, that
Because
would be
if
good.
we can
Yeah.
let you videotape it nicely, then Amy could figure out how we could all see it. Because she's fabulous.
Yeah.
Would you do that for us, Amy?
Sure, of course.
Thank you. Would you mind if Amy was able to?
I'll talk to Amy later.
Okay, because we can't get in, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so here's our liver. We can see the gallbladder peeking out anteriorly, and if we turn around the back, we can see the inferior vena cava. If we look underneath the liver, we see our gallbladder. We have actually the cystic duct exiting the gallbladder, and it will actually go down towards the duodenum. We have three types of vessels here, well, actually 4 types of vessels. In terms of the blood vessels, we have our hepatic arteries, which are all the red vessels. The blue vessels are going to represent hepatic veins. And then we're going to have our hepatic portal veins, which are represented by the purple. Okay, those are the purple vessels we see. This is the large hepatic portal vein right here. And we also have the green bile ducts. These are the small green structures. They will all join and as bile is produced, bring the bile to the gallbladder. Okay. What else do we have over our liver? There's a right lobe and a left lobe.
Could you say the green lines again?
They're bile ducts. Just bile ducts. Yeah. They just carry bile from the hepatic triads to the gallbladder. Okay, but this is our cystic duct right here. So gallbladder, cystic duct, and any other green structure is a bile duct. All right.
What's the purple one?
Purples are hepatic portal veins.
No purple.
Okay, and the blue is hepatic veins. Hepatic arteries. Right. Okay. Let's go to our stomach. Again, with our stomach, we see structures here that we saw in our large digestive model. Let me just take off the gastric band. Yeah. And we can see, you can see the muscularis layers here of the stomach. You can see this outer serosa. Remember the layers? We've got serosa, muscularis, and then inside, but we don't really see the other layers. We'll see them on the other model. We can see the rugae that are actually the raised ridges inside the mucosa of the stomach. This is where our esophagus comes in. We really don't see the esophageal sphincters, but we can see the pyloric sphincter very well here. Okay?
Where is it?
It's here exiting the stomach. Pyloric sphincter, yeah. But we don't see the esophageal sphincters. No, we don't really see them. There should be an upper and lower one, and it's not well demonstrated. Our next model is a isolated model of the pancreas. This pancreatic model, anteriorly you can see the pancreas, the head of the pancreas nestled in the duodenum, the tail of the pancreas. It's dissected open so that you can see the pancreatic duct, and you can see where the common bile duct, the green line, comes down to join the pancreatic duct at the ampulla of Vater, this lower sphincter right
We don't
here.
need to remember the top one?
No, we're not going to do that. Okay, we have, again, our duodenum, these ridges here. Does anybody remember what they're called? They're rugae in the stomach. And plicae circularis, plicae in the small intestine. We can also see our spleen. We can see, if we look at the back, we can actually see this is the celiac trunk. And here we have our splenic artery going to the spleen, and this would be a branching of the gastric artery.
Where's the duct?
Duct? No, celiac trunk. Celiac trunk. Yeah, and if we go to the front, the other thing we can see is this is the gallbladder and a piece of liver, and we can see the actual cystic duct here, and then remember it comes and becomes the common bile duct. Okay, so it starts cystic to common bile duct. Okay.
Because it joins.
Yeah. Okay, we're not going to get into much more than that. So let's leave that. Yep. Okay. What else we got? Oh, yes, we have the wall of the alimentary canal, particularly in the small intestine. Wall of the small intestine has a number of different structures that you can see. First, you can recognize the 4 layers of the wall. The very bottom, very thin layer at the bottom, this is the serosa, connective tissue, outer covering of the intestine. Then we have the muscularis. The muscularis is actually made of longitudinal and circular muscles. So we have 2 layers of muscles. That's our muscularis. You can even see this network of nerve tissue. These are nerves, ganglia and nerves. The ganglia and nerves make up what we call the myenteric plexus that actually send nerve signals to the muscle. Then the next layer is the submucosa. This layer here contains a lot of vessels, not only arteries and veins, but also lymphatic vessels. And we can see that just above the submucosa is the mucosa. The mucosa itself is actually made of finger-like projections. They are covered with epithelial tissue. Inside the finger-like projections, which are called villus, or villi for multiple, we can see our lacteals, these green structures. These are responsible for picking up lipids in the form of chylomicrons. Lacteal. Lacteal, okay. We can see our crypts of Lieberkund and the epithelial cells that line those crypts make digestive enzymes and hormones. What else do we see here? The only thing I don't see here is the, this great big nodule of lymphatic tissue. I believe it's considered here in this model, it's going to be considered a Peyer's patch. Peyer's patch. So as you can see, material that is picked up or absorbed by the lacteal can actually be filtered by the Peyer's patch.
What is this whole structure called?
Which one?
This whole thing, what is it called?
This is a section of the intestinal wall, small intestine, probably jejunum. Yeah. Okay. What else do we have? Respiratory system. Respiratory system. Back around. This is go to our 2 models here of the lungs. In terms of the respiratory system, I'll start with the lower respiratory tract and then we'll do the upper respiratory tract. With our lower respiratory tract, we have to be able to identify the right and left lung and the lobes of the lung. On the right side, we have 3 lobes: superior, middle, and inferior lobes. We can see also, if we remove this, we can see superior, middle, inferior. Superior, middle, inferior. In this model, we actually have a diaphragm as well. On our left lobe, we actually have 2 lobes, superior and inferior. Superior and inferior lobe. We can also see the pulmonary arteries, which are blue, and the pulmonary veins, which are red. And we can, if we open this up, we can also see, whoops, we can see red. Yes, they're backwards. We can also see in the lower respiratory tract here, we have a trachea with the cartilaginous rings going down. At the end of the trachea, a triangular end is called the carina. It actually has a number 21 on it here.
Sorry.
On this model, the cartilaginous rings are white. They go down to the end as the carina. From the carina, there's a branching of the trachea into the right and left bronchi. Okay, so we have a right and left bronchi. Those right and left bronchi will again branch into secondary bronchi, and they will branch again into tertiary. So we can see primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi as they go deep into the pulmonary tissue. We can also see on these models the esophagus. Okay, it actually runs behind the trachea, and we can see our descending thoracic aorta. If we look at the closer to the upper respiratory tract, we actually have our larynx and trachea. You can see your cricothyroid cartilage, the surrounding thyroid gland. And if we look at this model right here, we actually see the structures a little bit better. On this particular model, we have our cricothyroid cartilage, all of this blue right here, and extending below it is the trachea with the cartilaginous rings, also blue. Here is our thyroid gland, and if we look at the very top of this model, we can see the hyoid bone. This is the hyoid bone. If we open the model up, and look inside. Well, actually, before we open the model up, let's just look at the back for a second. The back of it, if we turn around the back, we can actually see the opening. That opening is called the glottis, and this flap right here is the epiglottis, and that will actually cover the opening. So the opening is the glottis, and this flap is the epiglottis.